Once we've gotten our materials and lighting tuned in a scene where we like them, it's time to think about optimizing our render. And there's a number of places we can optimize what we're doing, making sure we're not spending unnecessary time in a rendering. If you're dealing with a still, an hour-long rendering is not a big deal. But if you're dealing in an animation, this could be quite a significant time hit. Here's what I'll do in the rendering. First, I'll open up the Render Setup, and in here, I'll go into the Renderer tab. What we can see here is we're using the Unified Ray Traced sampling. This is different from the classic ray traced or the rasterizer, and is a new way of dealing with the anti-aliasing. What I'll do is push up the quality to 0.5 so I get a little better quality, but then I'll take the maximum samples down to 64 and try it out. Right now we're using a Gaussian filter, and this is a really nice blur. However, we're going to bring this into a post-effects program like After Effects or Nuke and apply depth of field in post. So what we need to do is question, is the blur we're using the right one, or are we taking a big hit in time making things crisp when we're only going to go back and blur them out later? For now, I'm going to leave it at Gauss and see how it behaves. I'll also scroll down and into the ray tracing section. In my reflections and refractions, I've got it set at a max trace depth of 12 to be able to see through the windows correctly, because they have an inside and outside pane. My reflections are at 6 and my refractions are at 6 as well. I'm going to turn off refractions because I'm not doing any bending of light through a surface for this scene. This means that in case anything was accidentally checked to refract, it simply won't, and I stand to save a little bit of time there. Now go look in the Global Illumination section, and this is where I deal with things like Final Gather. We've got some different ways of dealing with our sky. Right now, it's set to the skylight illumination from image-based lighting. I can also change this over to skylight illumination from Final Gather and get a different look. We've got our shadow mode set to transparent, and we can also choose opaque for faster. If we leave this alone, we get the look we had tuned originally. However, we can play with the shadow quality, again, possibly saving some time if our shadows are on varied surfaces. I'll put this down to 0.4, and then I'll look at the Final Gathering section. At the moment, I've got my diffuse bounces at 0, and this is very, very economical on rendering, but may give me a very heavy light. What I'll typically do is scroll up here, put the diffuse bounces at 2, and then put the interpolation up a little bit higher. I'll put the Final Gather interpolation at 40, so it smooths together my different points. It jumps into being a custom precision here instead of a preset. What we can also do is play with that initial Final Gather point density, lowering it down so we're not doing as many final points initially, but then only spending the time where we need. I'll put the density down to 0.06, but then bring up the raise to 75. For now, though, I'll leave the Project Final Gather points from camera position best for stills on. The alternate in here is to project from points along the camera path. There's 2 cameras in this scene, camera stills and camera entry. Camera entry does a slow dolly in, and in that one, we'll want to use the Project from Positions Along the Path option. For now, though, I'll try out a render and see how this looks, and see what else I need to do in terms of optimization. My last render time, and we can just see it at the bottom left of my display, was 1 minute and 5 seconds. I'll hit render and see if it goes higher or lower and what the quality is. My rendering finished, and I'll look over at the time. It actually went up in time, but I got a little better quality, and therein lies the trade-off. I went from 1/6 a frame to 1/19, a gain of 13 seconds. This may not sound like much, but remember I'm running a half-res scene. There's actually a quarter of the pixels in the final render here, and so I stand to have a good increase if I boost this up. However, I'm getting a better fidelity on the slight shadow right here on the flashing over the roof. And it's for little things like this we may want to spend the time. The other thing that contributed heavily is the Final Gathering. By bringing up those bounces, I forced it to do some extra work in the Final Gather and the bouncing of the light, but I feel like I'm getting a little softer lighting in here, and so it's worth it. We can economize our render, playing with the anti-aliasing, and also turning off and on things like refractions and reflections if we need, and pushing around where we're spending our time and quality to get the best render we can with the time we have available.